Swedenborg's Spiritual Hermeneutics by Henri Corbin, the Hexaemeron of the Creation of Spiritual Man. How should the first two chapters of the book of Genesis be understood in their internal, that is, spiritual sense? It must be done by applying what the Christian world has so utterly forgotten, that everything in the Word, to the smallest detail, envelops and signifies spiritual and celestial things. If this is ignored, life itself withdraws from the dead letter, as the external man dies when he is separated from the internal man. In the absence of this, what else is there to discover in the sense of the letter except that the subjects treated are cosmogony, the creation of the world, the Garden of Eden that is called paradise, and Adam as the first man created? Who would imagine anything else? And yet, in fact, the first chapter of the book of Genesis in its internal sense treats of the new creation of man, his new birth, that is, his spiritual regeneration, and thus of the establishment of the antiquissima ecclesia. Now, the times, that is, the states of the spiritual regeneration of man are divided into 6, and are called the 6 days, or periods of his creation, the Hexaemeron. They proceed from the moment when there is still nothing of a man, to when there is something of a man, and end by reaching the 6th day, when he becomes the imago Dei. Analyzed more closely, the succession of these 6 days or periods beginning with pre-humanity is presented as follows. The first day is the state of childhood, followed by the state that immediately precedes regeneration. This is a state of emptiness or thick darkness. The second day or second state is when the distinction is made between things that belong to the internal man and those that belong to the external man. In other words, those that belong to the Lord and those that are characteristic of man. The third day is that of internal change, conversion, metanoia. Henceforth it is the internal man that acts, but his works are still inanimate things, because he thinks that they come from himself. The fourth day is the state of man affected by love and enlightened by faith, that is, by the two lights that are within him. But it is only on the 5th day that he speaks by faith, and that the works produced by him are animated. They are called fish of the sea and birds of the sky. Finally, the 6th day, the spiritual man, who, by means of faith and love, simultaneously acts according to and expresses what is true and good. The works that he produces are thenceforth called a living soul, and he himself is imago Dei. Nevertheless, his natural life still finds its pleasure and its support in things that belong to the body and the senses. Thus, a combat persists until the work of the 6th day attains its completion in the 7th, when, under the sway of pure love, man becomes celestial. In our time, however, most people do not go beyond the first state. A few achieve the second state, others the 3rd, 4th, and 5th. A few the 6th. Scarcely any achieve the 7th state. What emerges immediately is the distinction made between the spiritual man, the 6th day, and the celestial man, the 7th day. This differentiation corresponds to the hierarchy of the Swedenborgian heaven, and it may be said that the 7 days characterize in their way the degrees of Swedenborgian initiation and spiritual hierarchy. But Swedenborg deplores the fact that in our time none have been acquainted with the nature of the celestial man, and few with that of the spiritual man, whom in consequence of this ignorance they have considered to be the same as the celestial man, notwithstanding the great difference that exists between them. What is this difference, characterized as the transition from the 6th day to the 7th day? It is said of the spiritual man that he is imago Dei, but the image is according to the likeness of the model. It is not the likeness itself, the similitude. The spiritual man is an image. He is called the Son of Light, John 12:35-36. A friend, John 15:14-15. The celestial man is the likeness itself, the similitude. He is called a Son of God, John 1:12-13. So long as man is spiritual, the 6th day, his dominion proceeds from the external man to the internal. But when he becomes celestial, the 7th day, his dominion proceeds from the internal man to the external, because his activity proceeds from pure love. Stated clearly in the commentary on the first 2 chapters of Genesis is the fundamental idea of Swedenborgian anthropology, dominated by the 2 categories of intelligence and will, Things relating to the cognitions of faith are called spiritual. All those that are of love for the Lord and the neighbor are called celestial. The former belong to man's intelligence, the latter to his will. With regard to the differentiation that is under discussion, we have then the spiritual man, the sixth day, is he in whom predominate the faith and wisdom that belong to the intelligence. This is the imago Dei. The celestial man, the seventh day, is he in whom predominates love, which belongs to the will, and this primacy of love is the divine likeness, or similitude. Herein lies the profound meaning of the verse, "Male and female created he them," Genesis 1:27. The intelligence of the spiritual man, that is all his power of understanding, is what the men of the Antiquissima Ecclesia called the male. Will, that is the fundamental power of love, which is the heart, the nucleus of the human being, is what they called the female. The conjunction of the two was for them the archetype of the heavenly marriage. The appearance of Eve will be understood, as we will see, on the basis of the same anthropology. Thus, the entire schema of this anthropology appears in perfect symmetry with the doctrine of the three heavens, the three categories of beings who have their abode there, and the three senses of the divine word. The first chapter of the book of Genesis discusses the spiritual man. The second chapter discusses the celestial man. That man was formed from the dead man. The dead man, that is spiritually dead, does not recognize anything as true and good except that which belongs to the material body and to this world. The ends that influence him concern only the life of this world. Even if a suggestion is made to him regarding knowledge of another world, a suprasensory world, he refuses it. He cannot believe in it. If he must confront a combat in his soul, that is, in the combat for the soul, he is defeated in advance. He is the slave of his external servitudes, fear of the law, of the loss of life, wealth, and reputation, all the things that he values for themselves. The spiritual man acknowledges the spiritual and the celestial as being the true and the good, but the basis of his acts is still a principle of faith, not pure love. The ends that influence him concern the life beyond this world. His combat for the soul is a victorious combat. He knows only purely internal bonds, the bonds of conscience. The celestial man has not only knowledge but also direct perception of the spiritual and the celestial. He acknowledges no other faith but that which proceeds from love, which is the principle of his action. The ends that influence him concern the Lord and his realm. He has nothing more to combat. He is the victorious one. He is the free being. He knows no other bonds but his perceptions of the good, which is the order of heavenly love, and of the true, which proceeds from that love. From the entirety of these characteristics, a precise feature stands out, that direct, immediate perception, which is the divine grace imparted to the celestial man. This is the central theme of the drama of the anthropology, of the history of Adam. The spiritual man is still only the sixth day of creation. He is the eve of the seventh day, the eve of the Sabbath. When he becomes celestial man, he is the seventh day, the Sabbath, the work of God, because the Lord alone fought for him during the 6 days, that is, created, formed, and made him. Thenceforth the external man obeys the internal man, and is in his service. The celestial man is the perfect man, complete by means of the life of faith and the life of love. The life of faith prepares him, but it is the life of love that makes him man, for a man is such as is his love, even as to his intelligence and his faith. The celestial man is himself the garden, in which it is said that the Lord set man. It is permitted him to know what is good and what is true by means of all possible perceptions. However, although the garden is he, it is not his. All his perceptions are activated in him by the Lord. The day when he considers that he can perceive from himself, that is, when he will want to investigate the arcana of faith and of the suprasensory worlds, relating them to sensory things, to scientific things, which are knowledges of the external memory, on that day the death of his celestial nature will occur. Then there will be an interruption in his subtle spiritual being of that mysterious internal respiration, the nature of which we have no idea about today. And that is why the substantial existence of something else, like the spirit, seems improbable to so many people, since they confuse what is connoted by the word spiritus with the breath of their physiological respiration. These lines sketch out the meaning of the first drama of this humanity. Like the drama itself, they concern the entire Antiquissima Ecclesia, which was the seventh day. At the same time, all the interior realities, the interiora of the word, are of such a nature that whatever is said in it of the ecclesia may also be said of each individual member. For if every individual were not himself an ecclesia, a temple of the Lord, he could not be a part of the ecclesia, nor could he be what is signified by the temple. For that reason, the entire Antiquissima Ecclesia is called homo in the singular. It is in this monadological reciprocity of the all and the every that will now be seen the internal sense of the drama that began with the decline of the seventh day, a drama that was by no means the drama of the flesh, as a popular and common exegesis would have it, but a drama, the drama, of human understanding and consciousness. On this point, there is a striking accord between Swedenborgian exegesis and Ismaili exegesis. However, as a prelude to the explanation of the internal sense of this drama, it is necessary above all to bear in mind the technical details that Swedenborg gives regarding what he designates as perception. There is no knowledge today of what it is, he says, because it concerns a certain internal sensation, a spiritual sensitivity that evidently can be only a paradox for all agnostic rationalism. But the celestial men of the Antiquissima Ecclesia knew very well what it was, and we have already been told that they participated in the privilege of this angelic perception, whereas the spiritual man has conscience but does not have perception, and the dead man does not even have conscience. Perceptions are of two kinds. One consists in perceiving directly truth or falsity, the being or non-being of a thing, and in perceiving also the source itself of the thought. There is another kind, common to angels and spirits, which consists in perceiving the quality of a being who comes toward them, simply by means of his approach and by a single one of his ideas. With Swedenborg, however, the theory of this perception proceeds from a profoundly and authentically mystical sentiment. It presupposes a transparency, a perfect translucence, in the sense that the being to whom it is imparted knows that in each of his acts of understanding and thinking, willing, and acting, the active subject is in fact the Lord himself. In a way, it is the substitution of cogitor for the Cartesian cogito, and it is this which makes of the celestial man a paradise, that is, the garden of the Lord. On the other hand, there are spirits who cannot do otherwise than to assume that they are the real agents of their acts of understanding, of their intelligence, and of their wisdom, and that if all this were to inflow into them, they would be deprived of life. They would not exist, and it would be another who was thinking, not they themselves. For these, it is impossible to understand what perception is and what life is. That is, the mysterious influx from the spiritual world, which is the light of every natural man. Not being able to understand it, they withdraw into an illusory self, and the more they cling to it, the more they become dark and opaque to that light. They can no longer recover what it is in them that is their true self. They commit an act of mortal confusion about the human proprium. They are expelled from the garden that man himself was, in his being, in the state of divine transparency. But since man was that garden, to be expelled from it is nothing less for man than to be expelled from himself. This was the decadence of the Antiquissima Ecclesia, that is, of the celestial person, whose posterity was finally suffocated by the flood.